Hey everybody, welcome to a new week. As promised last week, I mentioned that I was going to touch on corsets in general, and this week I am going to do a bit of a recap because I know I have mentioned this in my previous corset series, but I am specifically talking about lacing, and I'm going to demonstrate how to lace your corset. I'm sure some of you have bought corsets and they were already laced, and maybe you had to clean your corset and the laces were removed and you have no idea how to lace it again. I'm going to touch on that because there's a very specific way you can lace your corset so that you can be able to lace up yourself. I know there are a lot of videos out there that show people always have to be laced by somebody else, but the method I'm trying to show you, it's not my method. Specifically, it's generally known for with people who wear corsets and have to self-lace themselves. I'm going to demonstrate to you how you can be able to lace up your own corset. So apart from that, I'm also going to talk about lacing gaps. I'm sure you're wondering what that is. Basically, it's the gap between the two panels of your center back. I'll explain that more because there is something you need to learn about lacing gaps, specifically to understand if your corset really fits you well. A tip here is that a lacing gap should always be parallel. If your lacing gap is not parallel, there's an issue with your corset, and I'm going to explain what that is. So definitely stay tuned. Today you are going to learn a lot about corsets and lacing gaps, and in case you have any questions or there is specific things that I may have forgotten to mention when I'm doing this specific episode about lacing and lacing gaps and lacing your corset and everything laced, let me know, and I'll see you at the end of this video. This is typically how you would lace yourself if you are wearing your own corset and you don't have anyone to help you. This is how you would lace it, and I'm going to demonstrate it further in video form. So there is the grommets or the eyelets, which are the holes on each side. Each side has a rope or ribbon-like thread going through the holes. That's called the lace. The in between the two spaces is called the lacing gap. Then there is the bunny ears, which is the loop that comes right at the waist. That's what actually you pull to tighten your corset. The top half of the loop laces the top half of the corset, and the bottom half of the loop laces the bottom half of the corset, and you'll understand more in the video. So this is the back of the corset. These are the eyelets, and these are the laces that have been put into the eyelets. This here is called the modesty panel. It's usually about 6 inches wide. It's what you place under the laces when you're wearing your corset so that your back is not exposed. Depending on how you wear your corset, if you're wearing it on top of something, another garment, you might not need this, but this is if you just wear your corset directly on your body. So the lacing gap of a corset ideally should never be more than 4 inches. If it's more than 4 inches, the corset is probably too small for you. It's okay to have the corset completely closed like this, but it also means that the corset is too big for you because you don't have much leeway to pull the corset any tighter. So this method of lacing is very popular. I'm going to demonstrate how I put the lace in, and you have to do it in a very particular way because if you put it the wrong way, you might not be able to lace yourself. The point of this method is that you can be able to lace yourself. These are called bunny ears, and these two are usually right at the waist of your corset. The point of lacing or tying your corset on your waist is so that it cinches your waist. The point of a corset is to cinch your waist. So if you're wearing a corset and it's not cinching your waist, then it probably doesn't fit you well, or it was not made in the right way. But you usually lace it here, you don't lace it at the bottom. You can see my bottom has a knot. This is basically where the laces meet. You tie a knot and you try and hide it inside the garment when you're wearing it, but anyway, when you're pulling, you pull here. So I'm going to demonstrate how you pull. I'll demonstrate on the table, and I'll also demonstrate with the corset I'm wearing. I have done a video where I wear and remove a corset. I'll link it in the description box below. but I wanted to show you about lacing. So when you're lacing, you have to have this excess, which is not very visible now, and these excess are what you pull so that you can lace yourself. And when you pull them, it makes the corset fit you tighter and tighter. I'll show you even as I'm wearing it. But when you pull the bunny ears, these top laces pull the top part and these bottom ones pull the bottom part, as you can see. I hope it's very visible. So the point is, you pull the excess to tighten it, and when you completely tighten your corset, you can see that there are excess. So the whole point is, I need to show you how to come up with this excess as I lace the corset. So these excess are very important because it's what you will pull. The excess have to be on the outside and not the inside. I'm sure you have seen lacing where the laces go inside the corset, and it's usually very hard for you to lace yourself up if the corset laces are like that. So this is the ideal way you should lace if you're going to lace up yourself. So you can see even the knot is already hidden at the bottom of the corset. So let me demonstrate how you lace your own corset in case you bought a corset and the laces came out. I usually lace up the corsets that I sell, so that at least it doesn't give you that work where you have to do it. But I always include instructions on how you could be able to lace yourself, or you could also refer to the videos that I'm making. So ideally, once you have laced up, you tie a bow on your corset. You can leave it like that, or you can tuck it in depending on how you want to wear your corset. So I hope at least that explanation is clear. Lace is usually between 5 to 10 inches depending on the design of the corset. So if a corset is closed in the front, the lace will be longer because you don't have an opening in the front, like you don't have a basque and you don't have a zip. If a corset is open, then the lace sometimes is usually shorter. For this specific corset, because the back length also matters, there's some back lengths that are higher so that you just have more coverage of the back, and there are some that are lower. It depends on the design of the corset, and it also depends sometimes on people who do an underboob. When you do an underboob, most of the time you will want a higher back. I will demonstrate that probably next week or next week but one, when I am showing you how a corset should fit. Okay, so when you're lacing, always look for the middle knot. You knot the middle of the lace. If the lace is 5 meters, look for the 2.5 and knot. I guess you just put it together and then find the center, and this center will guide you when you are starting to lace, because you have to lace each side as you go. So you insert one end, you always insert it from the top side. It also generally depends on how many holes you have on your corset. Your guide will probably be after I have if you ever buy from me, it's after I've laced you. But anyway, the general rule is example, these eyelets are 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 11. If they are 11, an odd number, you will need to do a top loop. Right now it's knotted, so it's not making sense. You will need to do this so that you can be able to lace it in a way that when you reach the center of your waist, you'll be able to do the bunny ears without any issues. If you don't do it like that, then you could have issues. So I want to explain something about how you start your lacing process with the corset I have here. This corset has an even number of eyelets, and because it has an even number of eyelets, I do not need to start with a loop over here, which I will show you on the green corset. And because of that, now I have excess all the way through to the bottom. So remember, the point of the excess is to pull. So if you have an even number corset, you will start Xing from the top. If you have an odd number eyelet, then you will definitely need this loop here, so that the knot, the point is that this knot is always on the inside of your corset and not on the outside. That is why if it's even, start with the excess from the top. If it is odd, start with the loop at the top. Take note of that. So once you've put your loop, don't forget the knot is basically to help you lace evenly on both sides so that it doesn't move. It's basically to center your laces. Don't forget that when you reach your waist is where you add your bunny ears. The way you'd know where your waist is, I will demonstrate it when I'm wearing my corset physically, because there is a way you will lace depending on where you bend on your waist, because not everybody bends on their natural waist. But most of the time the eyelets at the top are more than the eyelets at the bottom. So because this is an odd number, my waist loops should come up to somewhere here. So I have 5 eyelets at the top and 4 eyelets at the bottom. So let's proceed with lacing. Those are the bunny ears. Remember, I counted 5 from up. I did that before I started lacing. You lace it again after you have put it in the bunny ears. Every time you are lacing it, you have to exit. And there you go. And then when you reach the end, you tie a knot. Just make sure it's a secure knot. That and usually find it secure. And then every time you are wearing your corset, you always have to make sure that you open up the lace to the fullest. Never ever wear your corset when it's still closed. Even if you have an opening, always make sure that you have completely opened up your corset. Yeah, so like that. The knot was out of frame. So this is basically how I tie my knot, and I make sure it's very, very secure. So this is my denim corset, and I am wearing it loosely because I want to demonstrate what a lacing up is. So when you look at the back, this is the lacing up. I haven't yet laced it up. I haven't pulled the bunny ears yet, but I wanted to demonstrate how that looks. So usually you pull the bunny ears itself to see how far it can reach, and then you keep pulling the excess. This is now the important part of the excess. You keep pulling the excess. The thing is that you can't see what you're doing, so you have to trust that you're doing it the right way. So you can see the bottom is done, the top is done. you pull it as tightly as you want. This corset currently is a bit too big for me, so it doesn't have much of a lacing gap after I have laced it, but you always have to make sure that it is secure, it fits you in a snug way. A corset is supposed to fit like a tight hug. It's not supposed to be so tight that you can't eat or drink. So, and then you tie the bow, you leave it. So as I had mentioned earlier, where you lace, where you tie the knot is basically where you could bend back and forth, because you need to be able to move in your corset. So that's generally where you know you will put your bunny ears. That where you have that movement is, as I said, it's different for different people. It's not always at your natural waist. It could be a bit lower, a bit higher. So that's where you gauge where you will put your bunny ears. So I hope that is clear. This clip may look familiar to some of you, as it's the clip I used when I was demonstrating wearing and removing a corset, but I wanted to explain something about lacing gaps and wearing a modesty panel. As you can see in this specific corset and also the denim corset, I did not put a modesty panel because it's a corset I usually wear on top of other clothes. You should never have your corset be directly on your skin. I will explain that more when we are talking about the care and wearing of a corset, but you should always ensure that there is another fabric or another garment in between your skin and a corset, because it can cause bruising. Another thing that you'll notice is that the lacing gap is always parallel, and I'm going to get into that more when I'm explaining more about different lacing gaps and what they mean. Remember that your lace should be of a good quality fabric. This one was made up of orange fabric I had to sew it up, join it, and then lace my corset with it. It's not the best method or the best way to lace your corset because of the seams it has, but always make sure that your lace is made out of sturdy fabric that doesn't fray, because the friction between the eyelet and the lace can affect how long your laces last. And yes, you can change up your laces. You can use ribbon, but make sure you use double-sided ribbon. So that's another thing I wanted to mention. Now we look at what a lacing gap means. Before that, we need to define what a lacing gap is. It is basically the back of the corset where the laces are, and depending on the shape of the laces, you'll be able to know if there's an issue or not an issue, where it fits right or doesn't fit right. So let's look at those. The first one is the perfect fit, which means that the lacing gap are parallel to each other, and it means that it fits you well. The gap itself should be at least 2 to 4 inches and not more than that. You may wonder why that matters. So when a corset is too big, there is usually no space between the lacing gap. So that means if you want to reduce or tighten your lace, you can't, because the corset technically is too big for you. That is why it's good to have the lacing gap at the back at least 2 to 4 inches. So if the gap is big, especially 6 to 10 inches like in the picture, it is way too big for you. It means that the side seams are even off balance. They're not where they're supposed to be. You won't have enough movement on your waist to be able to move around, and you'll also just run the risk of putting uneven stress on the corset and even damaging it and putting a lot of pressure on your back. So that's why it's important to wear a well-fitted corset. So let's look at the other issues. So when you see an A-shaped lacing gap, it means that maybe the bottom half is too small, and of course it usually happens more to women who are more pear-shaped. So you will find that the corset is trying to force the hips in, and it's not wise to do it because you can actually injure yourself. You cannot force your hips to become smaller, so definitely it's not the right fit for you. So that means the opposite is true. If you see a V-shaped lacing back, it means that the top half of the corset is too small for you, and it would not fit your rib cage or your bust, depending on the type of corset you're wearing, of course. And so it means your rib cage and your shoulders might be too broad for that particular corset. You can still get a corset that fits you well, but that particular corset is not the right fit for you. Then there is the diagonal line, which would mean that there are several issues that could be wrong. One, it could be how the corset was cut, and the fabric of the corset is the one that's causing the lines. Another thing could be that you may have just worn it wrongly. You didn't check in the mirror before you left, so maybe it just looks wrongly worn, so it could have twisted when you were wearing it. Another thing is that your body may have a condition that is listed on the screen. It could be scoliosis, you could have broken a rib, you could have one leg that's longer than the other, or some muscular or skeletal issues. So there are very many issues, so it's also just good to know your body, and maybe just also when you're wearing a corset, to check if you don't have any of these issues. So if you have seen this silhouette before, it could be very common, especially online, because it's a common sales tactic to sell corsets, and doesn't necessarily mean that the corset is the right fit for you. So basically this shape means, one, the corset may not have a curve. So some do have a curve, some do not have a curve at all. It could be straight, but the lacing at the back is one that looks curved. Doesn't mean it fits you. What it actually means is that the top is too small, the corset top is the top half is too small, and the bottom half is too small, and the middle is what fits. Or it could also mean that there's a lacing issue, so it's not reinforced properly. So definitely this is not a well-fitting corset, and definitely avoid this type of corsets. Your lacing at the back should always be straight, and that is a proper fitting corset. Lastly is basically the inverted hourglass, meaning that now definitely this corset doesn't fit your waist. So your top part may fit and your bottom part may fit, but your waist doesn't fit, and already there is no reduction because of this. And it's very dangerous to wear a corset like this, because you can damage the bones, you can hurt yourself, because it just won't give you any reduction at all, but the bones definitely would get damaged because of that shape. So yeah, in a nutshell, those are the things to look out for when you're looking at lacing gaps. I hope you've enjoyed and learned a lot about corsets and lacing. The last thing I would like to mention is that the lace you use for your corset is very important. You can't just use any ribbon. There is a ribbon you could use. It's a two-sided ribbon. You could use that to lace your corset, because it won't fray. You have to make sure that the lacing you use does not fray. So you cannot just use any string or cord. You have to make sure it's one that does not fray, because the more it gets into friction with the eyelet, the more it wears out. So always make sure that you get good quality lacing for your corsets. And yes, you can change your laces, which is the reason why I also did this video, because maybe you like to change up your laces, so it's important to do that. So that's it from me this week. I hope you have learned a lot. If you have any questions, do leave them in the comment section, and I am going to just link up the whole playlist. I have, I think, 8 videos around there, 6 to 8 videos about corsets. I really went very thorough. I think it's almost a year and a half ago I really went in depth, explained about historical corsets, types of corsets and all that. So if you haven't watched that content, you might find it very informative, and this is just to build up on it, and also to just recap some of the information I gave. So I hope I will see you next week with another topic on corsets. I will decide as I'm editing this video which one it will be, but I'm sure you will learn something, so watch out for that video. Thank you so much for watching to the end, and I will see you. Bye.